Welcome to Issues, where we take a look at the many issues facing the city of Wilmington. I'm Cherish McMillan. Today, we will be talking about student loan debt. It's back to school time and students are heading to college with high hopes of a brighter future. But how bright will their future be with tons of student loan debt to repay? In 2015, total student loan debt in the United States was estimated to be between $1.19 and $1.27 trillion. That's enough money to buy all of the sports leagues and still have some left over. Student loans, which sometimes carry high interest rates and penalties, continue to stick with young Americans years after, even decades after, they earn their degrees and enter the workforce. On our panel today is Wilmington City Council President Theo Gregory, Dr. Debra Troxler, Director of Communications and Planning at Delaware Technical Community College, and Nicole McDaniel Smith, Director of Financial Aid at Wilmington University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now, President Gregory, Wilmington City Council recently approved a piece of resolution that spoke to student loan debt. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I was sitting and talking to David Karras, who's on staff, about student loan debt. He's a student at this point in time, and we were talking about how could you give some folk relief with respect to the debt. I know when I came out of college, mine was deferred, and some of it was forgiven because I went on to law school, and I came back and I worked in professions in the city where student loan debt was forgiven. So we came up with a concept where we thought we could build in more forgiveness and or deferment for student loan debt, and at the same time helping the city of Wilmington in some public policy areas.
Okay. Now, on that same token, can you tell us how student loan debt is connected to government and politics?
You know, we in government, we always try to tie policy to some incentive or disincentive, and here we want to get masses of people to live in the city of Wilmington. We have a lot of blight, we have vacancies. The millennials as a group are coming along, so how do we get you into the city? So we came up with the concept that if we could convince the federal government to enact legislation, it wouldn't be at the local level because you can't do it at the state level, to enact legislation to say that if folk coming out of college will live in certain census tracts in urban, suburban, and rural communities where you need capacity, you need people with certain skill sets, then their student loan debt would be deferred and or forgiven. And that way you're helping the municipality, and at the same time you're helping folk with their student loan debt.
Okay. So now anyone can chime in on the next question. Can anyone tell me how banks and debt collectors benefit from student loan debt?
Well, now most of the student loan debt is held by the federal government through the direct loan programs. They parcel out the servicing to different banks to help service the loan, which is collecting the debts from the students and actually working on the deferments and the forbearances that Councilman Gregory mentioned. They're the ones who facilitate those programs directly with the student lenders. So they are servicers for the federal government, so I guess they at this point get paid in that capacity, but all of the interest collected and the debt itself is filtered back into the federal government through the direct loan programs.
Okay. Now, Dr. Troxler,
Yes.
can you tell us what students suffer the most with student loan debt?
I think it's students that they take out their loans and then they may not be able to finish for whatever reason. You know, life happens, but they're still responsible for that loan debt. So they may not be able to secure the job that they thought they could, and the loan factors into, you know, the daily living, your monthly payment. So you have to factor in your loan debt plus, you know, your car, your housing expenses and things like that. So that's one payment of many. And oftentimes we see students that don't secure a degree, but they still have that student loan debt.
Yes.
So it really affects those students.
What I found is that there are some students who get student loans and they live on those student loans beyond the necessity for being in college, not realizing that at some point in time you're going to have to pay that debt back.
Yes.
I think that may be a product. Well, you have to have self-determination, so you have to be disciplined, But also I think a little bit of that may come from the universities not, you know, I don't know if there's a central system where you can push a button and look to see how much debt you have and don't have, but a lot of folk take and get more debt than necessary, and they do have to pay it back, and it puts them in a rut and in a hole when they come out of college.
Yeah, that's very important. I'm glad you brought that up. That's why I always tell students to borrow responsibly.
Right.
Because you don't want to take any more loan than you need to finish your education. You really don't. Because a lot of times students are taking out loans to do other things, maybe buy a car or shop or whatever the case may be, where you don't actually need that money. And you have to think about it. You have to pay interest on that. So at the time, it's, you know, you're getting a check or a refund, but down the road, you're going to be paying a lot more back to the government. So really think responsibly when you're taking out a student loan.
Okay, so in thinking responsibly and making sure that students plan for student loans that they take out, how do they plan for the repayment of those student loans?
Well, at the point when they are separating from the university or the colleges, either through withdrawing or graduating, they are required to do something called exit counseling. And at that point, the required exit counseling is an electronic process that you log on to the government's website and you can complete it. Now, for us at Wilmington University, what we've done is stepped it up a little bit, and we offer in-person exit counseling. So we offer the students an opportunity. We have multiple sessions throughout the year where they come in and we talk to them about the debt. We give them the information you mentioned about how do they know how much they borrowed. We use the National Student Loan Data System we print out all of the federal debt that they have acquired throughout their college years at Wilmington University and before. And we tell them about their repayment options, because a lot of the problem with debt and with default on student loan debt is students not knowing what their options are. And when they come into economic problems, the first thing they want to do is hide, and they don't, because they're not aware that a phone call to their servicers can help defer their loan debt or give them forbearance, and it can avoid delinquency and default. So education is a big key on helping students with repaying their student loan debt.
Let me ask you a question so I can get some insight, and the viewing audience can get some insight. You said there's a national data system. So at any point in time, can you call up that data system and see a person's history and say, well, you went to this school, you got this certificate, and you're now in debt at this amount, and there's something going on here.
Absolutely.
And I really need to talk to you about what's going on here.
Yes. All federal loan debt is included. Perkins loans, parent loans, and student loans are included in that system. The only type of loans that's not are private alternative loans. In that case, we advise students that they have to pull up their credit reports. That's all kept track on the Experian report or in the major credit bureaus. That's where they can find the private loan debt. But all federal loan debt, anytime the schools or the student themselves can access that data electronically. It's not even a phone call. They can pull it up on the website, and it's all there for them.
But is there a component in your program where you then counsel the student and say, there's a red flag here. You're working on your undergraduate degree, and it only costs X amount of dollars to come here, and you've gotten 25% more than what you need to be here. What's going on? Because you're going to have to pay this back. Do you get into that kind of counseling?
That's a great point, but we do, because even at the community college level, we have students that are at their max. So as an undergraduate student, you can only take out $57,000 in loan.
Okay.
There are students at the community college level that do not have a degree that are at their max for loans. So we can, so if a student say has $30,000 in debt and still don't have a degree, we can have a conversation with them about that, but we cannot stop them from taking out more debt. And that is at the federal level. We are not permitted to say, if they want it, if they insist, we have to give them the loan. So
it's interesting.
Yes, it is very interesting. And we do have those very serious conversations, because I think students, they look at it as an easy fix. For sometimes, especially at a community college level, they don't need to take out, so much loan, but they choose to. And we cannot say no.
No, the other thing that I noticed, and I know this is your show, not mine.
No, it's actually, I'm just facilitating the conversation.
You all said that it was high interest. I remember when I was in college, it was low interest loans. They weren't high. So is the interest going up now compared to when I was in school?
Well, I think it's high interest on your private loans. I think that's what you were referring to. They're higher interest. It's low interest, but what you have to remember is the interest is compounding. Yeah. So the longer you wait to start repaying, that interest is compounding. So it's going to be more, than just the $3,500 that you took out. You're going to be paying a lot more than that the longer you wait to repay.
Yeah, and then and also to her point, she was saying interest is pretty high when you're using a student loan to buy a cup of coffee.
Right.
You're paying $1.50 for that cup of coffee, but when you add in the interest, you're paying $2. And that's the type of conversations we have with students, to be mindful of what you're borrowing. And like you said, only borrow what you need to pay your costs.
I remember when I was in school, which was a little while ago, there were two abuses taking place. One, the interest rates were so low that folk were getting loans to start a business. And then the second thing they would do is get all the loans and then declare bankruptcy. But of course you cannot declare bankruptcy and discharge a student loan anymore. But I just remember that in my interest rates that I had, it was very low interest rates. But I paid it, I got deferments, and when I had to pay, I paid it.
Nicole, you mentioned hiding from repaying the student loans earlier. What are the consequences of hiding?
Well, if your servicer cannot get in contact with you, if they cannot find you and they're trying to let you know that you have a payment due, that does not stop your loan from going into delinquency.
That's right.
And then eventually into default. And so then the consequences of that is wage garnishments, the denial of certain licenses for professional licenses, and various other things, the garnishment of your tax returns. So there's major consequences. So hiding is definitely not the solution, especially when there are programs. The sad part is that there are programs and there are resolutions that to prevent the students from going into delinquency or default. And it's usually just a call and a conversation.
Okay, so we now know that hiding from repaying our student loans will not make the student loan disappear. More on student loan debt when we return.
Trish is having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Welcome back to Issues. We're talking about student loan debt. Joining in on the conversation is Wilmington City Council President Theo Gregory, Debra Troxler, the Director of Communication and Planning at Delaware Technical Community College, and Nicole McDaniel Smith, Director of Financial Aid at Wilmington University. Now, Nicole, Wilmington University was recently approved for a program called EQUIP. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, sure. It is a really great, innovative program. Wilmington University has partnered with a service called Zip Code. They do a training, software training for individuals, usually job changers, people who are coming out of one profession and they're going into software coding. And through our partnership with the Zip Codes program, we were approved, one of less than 10 programs in the United States approved to offer federal aid for students in this program. Now, the program is about a 12-week boot camp where students are trained on software coding, and then they are placed by zip codes into employment situations. So most of the program is paid for by the employer partners that partner with zip codes. But then the remaining of the costs, we're now allowed through the EQUIP program to offer federal student aid, specifically Pell Grant. So then again, these career changers can complete this program without any debt, and then earn incomes up to about $60,000 coming out of this boot camp program. So it is a great program. It's innovative, it's different, and so that's why we've been allowed to offer federal aid, because we want to also make this available to people who can't pay the cost. So this makes it also accessible to people who still need federal or financial aid to complete education. So that's why we're excited about it, because it's different and it's accessible to a lot of different people. So that's what the EQUIP program is.
You mentioned Wilmington University being approved for the program. What are the requirements for colleges or universities to be approved and join in on this innovative program that Wilmington University has right now?
Well, it's an experimental sites type of program. So the university, the federal governments run these type of programs periodically throughout the year, and they have certain criteria depending on what the program is on how to be approved. Now, they did a lot of vetting of the program, of the zip codes program, and we also have partnered with a quality assurance program, Hankerman, I believe that's the name of that actually assesses the students' qualifications once they're going through the program. So we have, and to be approved, we had to show that this is a rigorous program, that it's going to result in some quality training for these students. And we submitted the documentation to the Department of Education to show that we have reviewed the program and that we set up the necessary things in place so that we can monitor the students' progress in the program and that the quality of the education is up to par. So those are the type of standards that the federal government are looking for in programs to participate in this EQUIP, to be able to offer federal aid to this non-traditional type of educational program.
Okay, so we're referring to the government a lot in our conversation today. And so, Council President Gregory, I want to ask you how student loan debt in Wilmington is connected to the way things are working in the city. Government relations in Wilmington for student loan debt, how student loan debt being a problem for students in the city of Wilmington is affecting the city of Wilmington.
Well, I don't think there's a direct cause and effect in that regard. What I'm trying to do is use the forbearance and deferring programs and forgiveness programs to get increase the critical mass of college grads in an urban community, and I just spread it out to suburban and rural communities, I guess, to be fair, so to speak. But if we could have this program where if you come and live in the city, you've graduated college, you're working on your master's, and you're going to live in a blighted area, an area that you normally wouldn't go live in with a college degree, and you're going to go in there and start building critical mass. And the way this thing works is if one or two people move into that block building critical mass, then you're going to get 2 or 3 or 4 more people moving into that area. So it helps the student, it helps the city in terms of addressing its blight and vacancies, and at the same time you're putting housing on the tax rolls, so we're increasing our tax base firstly, and then secondly, you're getting folk who are working in good jobs, so we're going to get more wage taxes. So it's just a win-win situation if we could get the federal government to enact this legislation. Now, I got one tweet on my social media saying, "Oh, Gregory, you know mayors can't do that." Well, you have to read the article. You have to read the legislation. I know that the city can't do it, the state can't do it, nor the county. It's the federal government, and we sent the resolution to our federal delegation asking that they look into this, because government is always trying to link policy to cause and effect situations. If we offer this, then we get that. If we offer that, then we get this. So I'll just try to create a win-win situation for everybody.
Okay, so we're speaking about win-win situations. Would anyone else on the panel like to see any government intervention in terms of tuition at colleges and universities?
Can I ask a question? I was told, there's a rumor that at one time government did the student loans from beginning to end in terms of, I use the word underwriting and processing to end, but now more and more they're letting private industry do it. Is that accurate? No?
Only the servicing part.
The servicing
Right
part.
now, as far as originating loans and actually funding the loans, federal student loans, that's all from the Department of Education, the federal government. Now, they have, again, being that they took over, they discontinued the FFEL program where banks and lenders were fronting the money for the loans. They were actually the lending the money. But now all of the funding comes directly from the federal government. The servicing, now they parcel that out because of the volume now of borrowers in the federal direct loan program, so they parceled out the servicing of the loans.
Okay.
So they are now from the beginning. Once again, I believe it started back up around 2010, where the federal government, or it could have been before, between 2008 2010, where they took over and they discontinued the FFEL program, and now they're back at funding from the beginning to the end.
You know, since we're talking to an urban community, we have a lot of disadvantaged youth, and hopefully their parents, and they are watching this show. And what I like to tell folks is you can go to college. To say that there's no money and you cannot afford college, that's an excuse now. You can go to college. College would be challenging for my kids because I had to pay for it. But if you don't have money, you can go to college. All you have to do is get good grades and be on good behavior. Good grades and good behavior, and there's a college for you out there, you can go to college. So don't ever say you cannot afford to go to college. You can go to Del Tech, you can go to Wilmington College, University of Delaware, Del State, in-state, you can go out of state, but there are ways for you to go to college, and if you're savvy and you use student loans appropriately, you won't be saddled unnecessarily with a lot of debt.
And we
So
have to
you
remember
can
we
go
do
to
have our
college.
wonderful SEED program, the
That's
Student
right.
Excellence Equals Degree program.
That's right.
So they
Absolutely.
can start at you know Delaware Tech or University of Delaware and their Associate Arts program, have their tuition and paid. They still have to pay your fees and books, but it's a wonderful savings.
What about the Aspire program? Do you all participate in that? Is that Del State?
That's Del State,
That's
yes.
Del State.
And they can, take advantage of that also. So we do have programs. Both of our, colleges and universities have scholarships available for students. So again, we're back to responsible borrowing,
Right.
because you have to also select a school that is affordable.
That's right.
So there are many choices. You have your community college, and we have our universities. There's, variance as far as cost, but you have to choose a school that is affordable to you.
Work study, small loans and grants, corporations, philanthropic community. There's money out there for you. And
Yes.
it's a little known secret. A lot of people don't realize this. I went to law school in the state of Delaware. It gave me about $1,000 a month because I went to the University of Florida. At that time, there was no accredited law school in the state of Delaware. So they have a law. If you want to get a degree in an area, and the state of Delaware does not offer an accredited degree, they will pay for you to go someplace else.
Absolutely.
And one of the biggest ones right now is med school. There are disciplines that if we don't offer in this state, I'm sure they still have the program. You can go elsewhere. But there's money out there. You just have to put a plan in place and be resourceful. It's not always about loans. It can be about grants, sororities, fraternities, Masonic lodges, your church. You can just stack and keep stacking and stacking, and there's always, you can work. You can work, but you can get a degree. Money should not be an excuse for people getting a degree.
So we're talking about money and financially planning to go to school prior to going to school,
That's right.
so we don't end up in tons of student loan
That's right.
debt.
Yes.
So where do students go to learn which school is best for their budget?
Well, I think there are wonderful resources on the internet. I mean, if you're interested in a college, you can go to their website and you can see the costs. I mean, the costs are there. So, and it's very important for parents and students and families to get an idea of how much it costs. You'd be surprised how many students come to an information session and they really do not know the cost of the college. It's very important. But we also have to remember there are students that are saddled with student loan debt. And I would just like to provide the federal government's number so that if they do need information, they can call, because there are very important loan forgiveness programs and flexible repayment programs. So that number is 1-800-443-3243.
Can you say that one more time?
Sure, 1-800-443-3243.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, is there a specific formula that students or families should use when calculating which school they can afford to go to? I know you mentioned making sure that you calculate in bills and housing and food and the actual cost of the school. Is there a formula? And if there is one, what is the formula?
Well, to me, there's no real formula per se, but it's just understanding what the costs are. There's a difference between the direct costs and indirect costs. And then when it comes down to keeping your debt low, you want to try to keep some of your indirect costs low. For example, tuition and fees are charges that you're going to incur at any school you go to, as well as books, even though there are ways to get your books cheaper than buying them, out of the store. You might be able to get them online or somewhere if you're able to. But you only want to borrow what you need to pay those direct costs, and then try to keep your indirect costs, your travel. Like if you're not living on campus, you don't have as much living expenses as you would if you were living in a dormitory. So you have a little bit more flexibility, even though the cost formula that schools use to determine your eligibility might use an average cost for students on determining, but your cost might be less.
Can I get some insight into something? When does a high school student's parents' income not count towards their ability to get a loan? I come out of high school, you counting my parents' income. Is there a time when I'm emancipated, so to speak? And
students are considered dependent on their parents, regardless of where they live, until they're 24 years old. When they're filling out a FAFSA, there's a series of yes and no questions to the students. Are you 24? Do you have dependents of your own? Have you ever been in a foster care situation or homeless? Are you a graduate student? Once you're a graduate student, you're automatically independent for most programs. But otherwise, the student will have to provide their parents information on the FAFSA until they're 24 years old.
So the parent says, I'm not cooperating. I'm not doing it. Now what do I do? Because you do have, my dad was like that. But my brothers and I, we fixed that. But how do you, what do you do?
In a lot of cases, it ties the hands of the financial aid office, because it limits the financial aid we're able to offer to students. Because the federal government requires that the first stop is the parents. Yeah. It's the parents' responsibility first, and then they come in with assistance.
It's problematic.
Well, we're running out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. For WITN and Wilmington City Council, I'm Cherish McMillan.